Let's start this history with some definitions. You can see here the terms for the different parts of a table knife. So what has influenced the design and use of the table knife? It has mainly been fashions in dining and the materials and technologies available to the manufacturers. The first knives in the Stone Age were stones or flints with sharpened edges. These were followed by knives with copper blades which, although soft, were easier to resharpen than stone. By the Bronze Age, bronze, the alloy of copper with tin, was cast in moulds to make blades, and finished with hammering. This was the beginning of smithing or forging of knives. Handles or hafts were made of wood or of animal bone. Iron had been used for blades with cutting edges as early as 2000 BCE, but it didn't become the standard blade material for knives in Europe until the 9th and 10th centuries BCE. The main use of the knife was still for preparing rather than eating food. During all these early time periods, men and women had a knife which they carried with them for cutting food, but in general they used their fingers for eating. The Romans introduced a greater range of knives, again not used for eating but to prepare and cut a greater variety of food. They had handles of bronze as well as bone and ivory, some inlaid with metals like tin, copper and silver. The Normans in 1066 brought with them finer table manners. Their tables were set with napkins, bowls and a few knives. But guests were still expected to use their own knives and spoons to eat with. This period saw the development of a more recognisable national table knife, with the two main centres of production being London and Sheffield. The manufacture of steel was improved, and by the mid-1500s, some blades were made from steel with an iron bolster and tang welded on, making a much stronger knife. The through tang was then decorated with an end piece or finial. Spoons, forks and knives were used for serving food but still not provided for eating. The focus moved by the end of this period to the handle. These became much more decorative in materials such as ivory, amber, agate, bronze, often inlaid with silver or gold. Knives were sold in equally decorative sheaths and were worn and carried as a fashion accessory, reflecting the wealth and status of the wearer. Forks, which had been used for some time in Europe, were brought to England from Italy just to hold food while it was being cut, not to put it in the mouth. This led to some travelling sets being made with a knife and a fork, and people having the second knife of a set of two converted into a fork. The shape of the knife blade changed significantly in this period to what is known as a scimitar shape, and the pistol grip handle was added. There were also further innovations in handle materials, as well as silver, agate, ebony, ivory, amber and tortoiseshell. Glass and porcelain handles were imported. British manufacturers like Bow, Chelsea and Worcester began to make porcelain handles as their popularity grew. The table knife had truly arrived. Separate dining rooms were becoming the fashion. The fork was an accepted part of a table setting along with the knife and spoon. To reduce costs, solid silver handles were replaced with handles stamped out of silver or Sheffield plate, copper coated with silver, and then filled with resin to add weight. For the first time, table knives and forks were sold in sets and provided by the host for diners to use. By the end of the 1700s, the shape of the knife blade had changed again to the French style, losing the scimitar shape and moving towards a more pointed shape. Service à la Française, adopted at the French court in the 1650s, had been accepted in the rest of Europe by the late 1700s. This involved different courses where several dishes were brought to the table together and diners helped themselves. Dining à la Française was replaced by dining à la Russe for grand dining. Here each course was served to the diner at the table by a servant. It was far less wasteful of food, but needed a lot more servants and, of course, cutlery and flatware, sets of knives and forks being replaced for each course. The blade of the table knife reverted to a simpler parallel shape, with a more rounded tip, which has remained the same with only slight variations up to the present day. The change in dining styles led to a proliferation of tableware, including knives, with knives being made for different fruits like lemons and tomatoes. Silver was often preferred to steel for the blades, as it did not rust or stain when it came into contact with fruit juice and was easier to clean. In the 1860s, Mrs. Beeton advised that a table setting should have cutlery and flatware ranging outwards from either side of the plate, enough for 6 or 7 courses, all laid ready for use by the diner. The fish knife or server and fork made its appearance in around 1880. Afternoon tea also became fashionable, and special tea knives and fruit knives were produced just for this occasion. The first natural plastics for handles made from celluloid appeared at this time, for example ebonite and vulcanite. These plastics were used to replace ivory and mother of pearl, which were becoming expensive. Also appearing was EPNS, electroplated nickel silver. One of the main influences in this period were the arts and crafts and Art Nouveau movements. Table knives with silver-plated handles in these styles were particularly popular. A second was the discovery of stainless steel by Harry Brearley in 1914. After the First World War, the first table knives began to appear made from one piece of stainless steel. Many large hotels and ocean liners had sets of knives and flatware designed specifically for them, and dining still required different sets for different courses. Synthetic plastics made from oil like xylonite first appeared early in the 1900s, but by the 1950s plastic became popular as a handle material in its own right, rather than as a replacement for another material. It was still fashionable to entertain at home and to put out your best china and cutlery. Canteens of cutlery were still high on anyone's wedding list in the 1970s and 80s. Today, the majority of table knives are made of all stainless steel or stainless with a plastic handle. There are still local manufacturers making well-designed quality table knives. Convenience or ready meals for eating on the go have become popular, along with disposable plastic knives and flatware to eat them with. These have now been replaced with more eco-friendly wood. Dining in general is much more casual, and larger table settings are only used for formal dinners like the local cutler's feast. I don't know what you think, but having a canteen of cutlery is not high on a wedding list today, and in most cases is not even on the list. We would like to thank Simon Moore and the York Civic Trust for allowing us to reproduce images from their publications.